The blazing sun hung heavy over the small, dusty gas station in rural Georgia. The air seemed thick, as if time itself had slowed down. Inside, Samuel Briggs, a retired Navy veteran, sat in his truck, staring out the cracked windshield. His Navy cap, faded and worn with age, rested comfortably on his head. His hands, though weathered by years of service, gripped the wheel with the kind of steady calm that only a man who'd survived wars could understand. The world around him was quiet, peaceful, a welcome contrast to the chaos of his past. But peace, as Samuel knew all too well, was fragile. The silence was broken by the roar of engines in the distance. It came slowly at first, like thunder building on the horizon, until the ground trembled beneath him as a gang of bikers, a chaotic, unruly pack of leather jackets, tattoos, and sneers stormed into the gas station. Their leader, a hulking figure with a wild beard and tattoos snaking down his arms, hopped off his bike and sneered at Samuel, as if he were a relic from a forgotten time. Big Duke, the gang leader, locked eyes with Samuel and grinned. "What's this, Grandpa? You think your hat makes you untouchable?" he sneered, his voice full of mockery. The gang chuckled, their laughter filling the air like a dark cloud. Samuel didn't respond. He didn't need to. He had long since learned that silence was sometimes more powerful than words. His calmness only seemed to irritate them more, feeding their egos and pushing them further into their twisted game. The gang continued to circle around him, jeering and taunting. They shoved Samuel's truck, rattling it with every blow, hoping to provoke him. One of them, a younger, scrawnier member named Chops, slapped Samuel's cap off his head, sending it tumbling to the ground. "Pick that up, old man," Chops barked, his voice filled with youthful bravado. Samuel remained still. He knew what they were expecting, a violent reaction. They wanted to see an old man crumble, to witness the frailty they thought defined him. But Samuel wasn't a stranger to battles fought in silence. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached for the cap, lifting it from the ground. The gang watched him, waiting for him to lose his composure. But Samuel's face remained as impassive as ever, his eyes never wavering from their fixed point on the horizon. "You think that hat makes you untouchable, old man?" Big Duke's voice boomed, stepping forward now, his shadow looming over Samuel like a storm cloud. Samuel finally spoke, his voice low, but carrying the weight of years. "You ever stand still while mortars fall 50 feet away? Or wait in silence, knowing that every minute could be your last? I don't talk slick, son. I talk straight." The words hit harder than any physical blow. The bikers fell silent, unsure how to respond. Big Duke wasn't one to back down easily. His pride, built on years of intimidation and fear, couldn't allow Samuel to stand unchallenged. But something about Samuel's unyielding calmness had shifted the balance. The bikers had misjudged him. They had assumed that because of his age, his solitude, and the way he wore his past like an old jacket, he was an easy target. They were wrong. "You think you're some kind of war hero, don't you, old man?" Big Duke spat, a sneer curling on his lips. "You think your experiences give you the right to look down on us?" Samuel stood, his back straightening as he took a step forward, eyes narrowing with an intensity that seemed to pierce the very air between them. "I didn't ask for it," he replied, his voice quiet, but every syllable cutting through the tension. "I did what I had to, and I hope you never have to." The bikers exchanged confused glances. They couldn't understand why they couldn't break him. They saw him as just an old man, but in that moment Samuel felt younger than he had in years. The weight of his past was no burden, it was the very thing that gave him the strength to stand here today. Big Duke hesitated, his hand lingering over his leather jacket, unsure of how to proceed. It was as if a veil had been lifted from the gang's eyes, revealing the reality of their miscalculation. Just as the tension was at its peak, a voice from the gas station counter cut through the thick air like a knife. Mick, the cashier, stepped out, looking calm, but his eyes were sharp with understanding. "You really don't know who you're messing with, do you?" Mick's voice was steady, but there was an underlying current of respect in it. "Samuel here? He's not the kind of man you mess with unless you want to learn a hard lesson. The bikers turned, their collective arrogance faltering as Mick continued. That man? He's fought battles you wouldn't believe. He's not here to prove anything. He's here to live, quietly, and that's the biggest challenge any of you will ever face. Big Duke's eyes flicked between Samuel and Mick, the realization slowly creeping in that they had picked the wrong target. His pride swelled, but there was an unmistakable sense of doubt now, gnawing at him. What the hell is this? Chops asked, his voice faltering as he eyed Samuel with a newfound respect. What's his story? Samuel met his gaze, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. I did what I had to. I pray you never have to. The bikers, once so full of bravado, now stood in silence. Their leader, Big Duke, looked at Samuel one last time, sizing him up as though weighing a decision. Then, with a heavy sigh, he nodded, signaling the gang to retreat. Let's go, Big Duke muttered, his voice barely audible, as the bikers revved their engines and sped off, leaving behind a trail of dust and confusion. Samuel remained in the same spot, his body still, his face unreadable. The storm had passed, but Mick's words lingered, echoing in the stillness. You think you know a man by his age, by his appearance, by the way he carries his past. But you don't. You can't. Samuel Briggs? He's the last person you ever want to underestimate. Samuel looked out at the empty gas station lot, the sun beginning to set on another quiet evening. He and Mick shared a moment of silence before Samuel broke it with a simple, profound statement. Sometimes, he said quietly, the greatest strength is in doing nothing at all. The dust from the retreating bikers settled slowly in the still evening air. Samuel Briggs stood quietly, watching the taillights disappear down the long stretch of empty Georgia highway. The oppressive heat hung like a blanket over the small gas station, but for the first time in hours, the air felt lighter. Yet, despite the small victory, Samuel felt an unease in his gut, an instinct, honed over years of military service, that told him the storm wasn't over. Not yet. As Big Duke and his gang disappeared into the distance, Samuel's mind wandered back to the brief exchange that had just taken place. Mick's words, though offered with the best of intentions, had opened something that Samuel wasn't sure he was ready to confront, something deeper than just a few rowdy bikers. It was the idea that perhaps this wasn't a one-time encounter. Perhaps, just perhaps, the prejudice wasn't merely limited to these bikers. The truth was, prejudice was far more insidious than any biker gang. It lived in the corners of small towns like this one, quiet, unspoken, but always there, ready to rise when least expected. Samuel didn't just face prejudice from a group of unruly bikers. He faced it from the system itself. The very people who were supposed to protect him were complicit in the biases that shaped his life, that trapped him in a world that saw him only for what he appeared to be on the surface. A tired old veteran, a relic of a bygone era, an easy target. Later that evening, as Samuel was finishing up his coffee inside the gas station, Mick, the cashier, approached him again. The atmosphere was different now, tense, as though Mick were wrestling with something that had been on his mind for a while. He hesitated before speaking. Samuel, I need to apologize, Mick said, looking down at his feet. Samuel glanced up, raising an eyebrow. Apologize for what? For saying what I said to them. Those bikers. They were no joke. And I'm afraid I've been living under this illusion that things are better, more civil. But the truth is, I know you've faced more than just them today. The way people look at you, it's not just the bikers, man. It's everywhere. Samuel's eyes darkened as he sat back in his chair. What do you mean by everywhere, Mick? Mick wiped his hand across his forehead and took a seat across from Samuel. I mean the system. People like you who've given everything for this country, they get shoved aside. You were a Navy vet, right? But when was the last time you saw any real recognition for it? I mean, how many times have you been overlooked for jobs, denied benefits, or treated like you don't matter? It's not just the bikers. It's the system. Samuel let the words sink in, his face hardening. The realization was sinking in deeper. Now this was a bigger fight than just defending his honor against a few bikers. "You've seen it," Mick continued. "The way the law works. The way people treat someone like you in a town like this. Your presence, your service, they don't mean anything to some of these people. You're just a reminder of things they want to forget. An old man trying to live out his days in peace while the world just passes him by." Samuel leaned forward, his knuckles whitening against the edge of the table. He was no stranger to fighting battles. He had faced his fair share of them over the years. But this felt different. This was not about a physical fight, nor was it about just surviving. It was about exposing something far more dangerous, the silent oppression that many never saw or, worse, chose to ignore. The following day, Samuel decided to visit the local government office to investigate something that had been gnawing at him for years: his benefits. As a retired Navy vet, he was entitled to certain benefits, but the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the endless hoops to jump through, it was a maze that had kept him tangled for far too long. He'd been patient before, but now that patience was wearing thin. He walked into the office, his gait steady, but his mind was racing. The receptionist, a young woman with tired eyes, barely looked up as he approached the desk. "Can I help you?" she asked in a monotone voice. Samuel set the envelope containing his paperwork down on the counter. "I'm here to check on my benefits," he said calmly, though his voice carried an underlying firmness. "I've been waiting for a long time." She glanced at the paperwork, her eyes skimming over it briefly before she let out a sigh. "I'll need you to fill out these forms again. Some of the details have changed. You'll need to speak to the manager about the delays." Samuel nodded, but something in the woman's tone struck him. He'd been to this office countless times before, and every time, there was a delay. Every time it was someone else's fault. This time, however, Samuel wasn't about to let it slide. "Who's the manager?" Samuel asked, his voice more direct than before. The receptionist hesitated, clearly taken aback by his sudden assertiveness. "It's Mr. Harris. He's in the back." Samuel walked past her without waiting for another word. The back office was small and cramped, the air stale with the scent of aging paper and cheap coffee. He found Mr. Harris sitting behind a desk, his eyes darting nervously to the stack of paperwork in front of him. "Mr. Harris?" Samuel's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "I need to know why I've been delayed for months on end for my benefits." Mr. Harris looked up, startled. His posture shifted and he straightened in his chair. "Mr. Briggs," he said cautiously, It's a complicated process. You see, I'm a Navy veteran," Samuel interrupted, his voice hardening. "I served this country, and I'm being punished for it. You don't get to tell me it's complicated. I want answers." The manager shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Briggs, please. I understand your frustration, but these things take time. There are processes we have to follow. You have to understand." Samuel slammed his fist on the desk, silencing Harris. "I understand that it's always complicated when a man like me comes asking for something he's earned. I've waited long enough. Now you're going to explain to me why I've been treated like this." Harris's face flushed with a mixture of fear and irritation. "I don't know what you're implying," he said, his tone defensive. Samuel didn't let him finish. "What I'm implying is that a man like me doesn't fit into your neat little system. Does he? The old war hero, the one whose sacrifices are treated as insignificant, who's tossed aside like a broken tool. And when we come asking for what we deserve, we're treated like a problem." Harris remained silent, his eyes darting to the door, as if considering whether to call security. Samuel could feel the walls of this small room closing in on him, but he didn't back down. Instead, he stood taller, his presence growing stronger with each word. "I'm not going anywhere until I get the respect I deserve." Later that day, as Samuel walked back to the gas station, his mind was on fire with the realization that his battle wasn't just with the bikers or with the local government, it was a battle with the system itself. The prejudice he faced wasn't just isolated to the small gas station or the bikers who had taunted him. It was everywhere, woven into the fabric of the very institutions that were supposed to support him. He made up his mind. He wasn't going to fight this battle alone. As Samuel walked through the door of the gas station, Mick was already waiting for him. Samuel could see the look of concern in Mick's eyes, the silent question of how things had gone. "They gave me the runaround," Samuel said, sitting down with a heavy sigh. "But I'm not done yet. I'm going to expose this for what it is: systemic bias. I'm going to make sure people like me aren't ignored anymore." Mick nodded, his eyes gleaming with understanding. "You're not alone in this, Samuel. You've got me. I'll help however I can." And so the journey began. They started small, gathering information, reaching out to other veterans in the area who had been given the same treatment. They recorded their stories, documented their experiences, and slowly, Samuel built a coalition of people who had long been silenced. The more they dug, the more they uncovered the ways veterans were denied benefits, the systemic bias that kept them from getting what they were owed, the hidden prejudices that shaped the decisions of those in power. But with each victory, the system fought back. The local authorities, the media, and even some of the people Samuel thought were allies turned their backs on him, trying to shut him down. Samuel's resolve, however, only grew stronger. The climax came when Samuel stood in front of a packed town hall, facing the very people who had turned their backs on him. With a quiet intensity, he spoke of the injustices he had faced, not just for himself, but for all those like him who had been overlooked for far too long. "We've been quiet long enough," Samuel said, his voice ringing through the hall. "We've been told our voices don't matter. But today we make them matter. We stand together. And we demand the respect and recognition we've earned. No more lies. No more delays." As Samuel spoke, Mick stood beside him, a small but powerful gesture of solidarity. And in that moment, the room fell silent, not in fear, but in respect. The resolution wasn't instant, but it was inevitable. With Samuel leading the charge, the town began to shift. The system began to listen. And in the end, the truth came to light: proof that prejudice, though persistent, could be dismantled when people dared to challenge it. Samuel's quiet strength had not only exposed the injustice, but it had also sparked a change that would last for generations. And as he looked back at the town, at the people who had once doubted him, he knew that while the battle was won, the war against prejudice would continue. But for now, Samuel Briggs could rest easy, knowing that he had made a difference not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been silenced. If Samuel's story moved you, if you believe that injustice must be confronted and systemic bias must be exposed, then don't remain silent. Share this story. Subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge prejudice, spark change, and inspire action. Together, we can continue the fight for justice.